John Deere says it's moving some of its production to Mexico, according to an email that was sent to Waterloo employees.
Just notifying John Deere right now, if you do that, we're putting a 200% tariff on everything that you want to sell into the United States.
It's hard to believe two forces that once chanted for America in unison are now locked in fierce opposition. John Deere calls the departure a strategic move. The White House sees it as a suspicious retreat. But in the farming states, people only see broken machines with no one to fix them, failed harvests mounting bank debts, and no one who truly cares that they're going hungry. And so the question must be asked, is this a desperate flight in the wake of the right to repair scandals? Or a proud exit sending a direct message to the president? Whatever the reason, the consequences have already rippled through the food chain prices and the very future you're living in. John Deere leaves America for good. These 10 states will starve first and find out if your state is on the list. Number 1, Nebraska. In Nebraska, people don't go hungry because of a lack of land, but because of a missing encrypted bolt. When harvest season comes, farmers no longer ask, will it rain, but will the machine run? Some do, some don't. And some stuck in the field stay silent all season just because of a software error. 6 weeks for a technician to arrive, while the weather only gives them 3 to harvest. A tractor now costs nearly $500,000. But if it breaks down, the owner, even living 200 miles from the dealership, isn't allowed to fix it themselves because of software locks, because of warranty policies, because the terms weren't written for farmers, but to protect John Deere's business model.
5 years away before farmers actually will be able to fix their own equipment.
And then John Deere left America. Some think it was the result of legal pressure of the right to repair movement spreading across states. But Nebraskans, those who've lived long enough to know money doesn't flow backward to the fields, saw something else. They knew not a single lawsuit cost John Deere a dime in profit. The Q1 2025 report still showed $1.9 billion in profit. Dividends still paid. Factories still running. Just no longer on U.S. soil. John Deere didn't retreat because they were pressured. They left because they had the opportunity. Because a bill named the Big Beautiful Bill created the perfect backdoor. The Big Beautiful Bill was marketed as a way to protect domestic production, but underneath it paved the way for big corporations to expand power, while tightening the grip on farmers and small businesses. This law raised domestic taxes, tightened tech regulations, cut subsidies, while placing no barriers on relocating production lines overseas. John Deere wasn't punished. They were encouraged. They left before the policy even took full effect. No apologies, no promises to retain jobs, and they left Nebraska with consequences visible in every number. Thousands lost jobs. Hundreds of dealerships shut down. Thousands of farming households defaulted because there was no equipment running in time. When machines break, harvests fail. When harvests fail, banks don't wait. And when banks demand payment, land changes hands. John Deere took the factory and pulled with it the entire economic chain of an agricultural state. Food prices rose, not just because yields dropped, but because supply became unstable. Nebraska was no longer the price anchor of the agricultural market. They became a place struggling to survive. Meanwhile, the Big Beautiful Bill kept cutting deeper into food assistance programs. One hand pushed prices up, the other pulled meals away. 13% of farming households in Nebraska applied for emergency food aid in June 2025, a 40% increase in just 1 year. But not everyone received it. Because even relief is dwindling, the new policy doesn't allow everyone to survive.
There are people that are not homeless that go to the food banks, like I have 6 children.
Nebraskans no longer ask if John Deere will return. They know it won't. But they also no longer believe the man who promised to make America great again. What's great about an agricultural state starving in the middle of harvest? In the end, people came to one conclusion among the most powerful and those who built wealth off farmers. No one truly thinks about the farmer. Number 2, Iowa. Iowa used to be the favored child. When other states waited months to have machines fixed, Iowa waited only days. When dealerships elsewhere closed down, this place still had full parts warehouses. Farmers understood they had to pay more. But in return came priority. Something they were so used to they no longer named it. In Iowa, John Deere was never just a seller. They were part of the community. Their logo stood next to school emblems, appeared in local sports leagues, sponsored town libraries and hospitals. Some families had 3 generations working on the same assembly line. Kids grew up under the shadow of the plant, not to leave, but to continue. So when rumors spread about John Deere moving production out of the U.S., Iowans weren't worried. They believed if there was any place worth keeping, it would surely be theirs. But then parts orders started arriving late. Technicians gradually transferred to bigger states, and people realized they were no longer prioritized. Not because they lacked loyalty, but because they'd been replaced. They looked north. In Canada, John Deere had just inaugurated a new distribution center. Dealers in Quebec and Manitoba started offering special pricing to local farmers, financial support discounts on new equipment, on-site warranties. In the South, Mexico not only received production lines, but also became the pilot site for a new customer care program, 72-hour repairs, free shipping, bundled software updates. All those privileges, once Iowa's quiet pride, were now given to others. Not partially, completely, even more than before. For the first time, Iowa had to face the truth they were not the exception. They never were. Just prioritized until they were no longer needed. And the next state on the list should probably start preparing for what no one wants to believe. Because if even Iowa can be replaced, then no place is a permanent pillar. Number 3, Kansas. The third story is the most distinct in today's list. Kansas wasn't surprised that John Deere left the U.S. Here, people are used to corporations coming and going, used to always being the last to hear the news. So when the John Deere sign changed, when the maintenance line was cut, when parts arrived late, no one panicked. Just a few quietly changed the brand name on their next season's order slip. Kansas farmers didn't choose John Deere out of sentiment. They chose it because it was the least risky option at the time. Equipment integrated software, GPS credit warranty, everything in one ecosystem. Sounded convenient until something broke. Then they realized they owned nothing but debt and a machine they couldn't touch. Maintenance costs climbed. Repair times dragged. Yet John Deere kept reporting quarterly profits. Every time people saw the profit figures, the contrast became clearer. Executives made millions while some had to abandon crops because they couldn't afford a new control panel. Not because they were incompetent, but because the machine, though on their land paid with their money, still needed a password from an external system. So many started switching brands. Case IH Mahindra Kubota. Whichever still worked, someone tried. Some replaced their entire fleet. Others kept only machines without software locks. No one believed it was a long-term solution, but they also couldn't continue with John Deere. However, the more realistic you are, the harder it is to stay optimistic. Case IH, once the most promising, began using a subscription model for its 2024 lineup. Soil maps crop data, once included, now required monthly fees. Kubota raised import part prices due to rising logistics costs, forcing many to buy used parts. Mahindra, long seen as the budget option, recently launched exclusive maintenance contracts across the Midwest, including Kansas. No brand declared a right to repair lock, but all signs pointed to the same model: closed ecosystem, open invoices. In Kansas, people don't expect anyone to side with the farmer. They just need to know if a machine breaks, can it be fixed? If the harvest fails, will someone share the risk? The answer is becoming clearer: no, and hunger started to creep in. Not with alarm bells, but through each idle field. Machines silent in peak season. Co-ops denied credit lines from JD Finance, forced to shut down or merge. According to the Kansas State Ag Department, in Q2 2025 alone, nearly 18% of mid-sized co-ops ceased operations. Food that doesn't leave the field means food doesn't leave the state. Small towns began seeing grocery prices rise due to in-state supply shortages. Supermarket shipments delayed, not for lack of goods, but because the harvest wasn't done. A system stalled, not from laziness, not from floods, but from a software error no one was allowed to fix. Number 4, Georgia. Georgia doesn't love John Deere. They invested, they paid, and then they accepted the loss. Here there are no tractor monuments, no generational memories tied to a factory. Georgia's farmers didn't grow up on heartwarming stories about green paint. They came to John Deere like they came to a contract technology for productivity, data for control, the future for a loan, self-driving machines, satellite soil maps, fertilizer management via smartphone. Georgia got ahead of many states by betting on smart agriculture. They upgraded not because old machines broke, but because they believed slow meant falling behind. And John Deere was the fastest ticket they had. Everything worked as expected, until no one stood behind the system anymore. John Deere pulled production out of the U.S. dealerships, thinned. Parts came late. It took 3 weeks for a technician to return a call 5 to show up. Soybeans sat too long in the field. No one could touch the software inside the machine, and the season was abandoned. Not because of pests, but because no one could even open the hood. Georgia didn't react like Iowa. No anger, no sadness. They just did the math. To them, John Deere was an unrecouped investment, and now it had to be handled like any other loss. The hard part was that they couldn't return to old ways. Too many systems were integrated, too much data locked in. The more modern the machine, the less repair rights they had. And the more people relied on tech, the more disoriented they were when abandoned. Georgia doesn't look for loyalty, but they believe in efficiency. And when efficiency disappears, there's no reason to keep anything. They don't chase brand names. They don't dream of a better company. They just need a system that runs when it's time to harvest, no matter where it's from or what color it is. The big beautiful bill, once touted as a major boost for agriculture, didn't keep a single company from leaving. But it left Georgia with a string of consequences/subsidies, higher input costs, delayed deliveries, and no one retains the right to control the machine they bought. Georgians don't blame John Deere, but they remember that they once believed technology was the way out. Now no path feels certain. And in a world where every device needs a passcode to start, farmers, more than ever, are left with only themselves, not to cultivate, but to relearn how to survive. Number 5, North Dakota. North Dakota once warned. But no one listened. In 2023, thousands of farmers from this state jointly signed a petition sent to John Deere and the federal government requesting something seemingly simple: the right to repair the machines they had purchased. They weren't asking for privileges nor demanding incentives. They only wanted, when equipment lay dead in the field mid-season, the right to open the machine without having to seek corporate permission. No response, no meeting, no change. A year later, a John Deere GPS update malfunctioned, misaligning entire plow lines. Nearly 1,200 acres had to be replanted. Still, no one took responsibility. The losses remained buried in the debt ledger. But the people of North Dakota did not stay silent. They spoke up, continued to demand transparency, demanded to be treated like other important states. No one listened. And what angered them most wasn't that John Deere would leave in 2025, but that even in resistance, they were ignored. North Dakota isn't a media hub, nor does it have any cultural icons tied to agriculture, but it grows wheat, corn, and soybeans for half of America. They don't ask for recognition, only to be included in the technical support strategy. Yet year after year, all they see are broken machines with no one to fix them. Letters sent, no replies. Cumulative losses shared by no one. John Deere doesn't need to change because it's still making profits. Nearly $2 billion in just the first quarter of 2025. This made the people of North Dakota realize their rightful anger, however justified, is still not enough to impact a balance sheet. And that's the deepest pain. You can be right, you can endure, you can speak loudly, but if you're not on the profit map, you won't exist in anyone's long-term plan. Just to the north, Canadian farmers receive government support for software updates, machine tax reductions, and are protected by right to repair laws. Meanwhile here, those who produce food for their own country are forced to sign waivers promising not to repair the very equipment they paid for. North Dakota no longer hopes for an apology. They only want just once to be seen as part of the bigger picture, not the margin to be trimmed when it's time to cut costs. Number 6, Illinois. There was a time when every road here led to the gates of the John Deere plant. The production lines didn't just create machines, they forged the identity of an entire community. Graduation caps bore the Deere logo, wedding photos were taken in front of company statues. Dinner prayers included the word stability, something generations believed John Deere would always provide. But what was once certain began to blur. Not because of any grand announcement of withdrawal. Just a series of quiet signs that followed one another, slowed assembly lines. Frozen job postings, engineering teams merged, then disappeared. According to the Illinois Economic Partnership, over 780 positions in the Moline area were silently terminated over 8 months. No goodbyes. Just inactive keycards one Monday morning. No one rioted. No one took to the streets. But in that silence, people felt they were being erased from a story they had once been central to. Because what was lost wasn't just income. It was a sense of purpose, a pride once tied to their work. When John Deere pulled away, no one declared it over, but everything felt so hollow it didn't need to be said. From that emptiness, a new trend quietly took shape. Subtle, but increasingly clear. Some farmers in western and northern Illinois chose something they had never considered before migrating to Canada. Not because Canada is a paradise, but because they saw what was happening. In the place they once lived and trusted big corporations were retreating one by one. Policies like the Big Beautiful Bill, though branded as protecting domestic manufacturing, only gave more power to companies while workers, farmers, those who contributed quietly, were increasingly left out of the conversation. Meanwhile, across the border, the Canadian government publicly supported repair rights, subsidized smart machinery-trained technicians in remote areas, and expanded credit access for young farmers. There, at least, they felt seen and counted. No one left in bitterness. They just quietly stepped away from a table where they were no longer dealt cards. And what stung most for those who remained wasn't that they lost, but that they realized years of loyalty weren't enough to keep a name from leaving when everything is now determined by cold profit spreadsheets. Illinois is not starving from lack of food, but it's running out of something else: trust. No one can say for sure what the next generation will have to be proud of. And when the departed aren't missed and the ones who stay aren't mentioned, that hunger, though invisible, gnaws away at every porch, every voice in the quiet cafes. John Deere doesn't need to turn back. It has chosen places with more profit, fewer voices, more incentives. But at that very moment, Missouri began to understand machines may stay, but the people who gave them meaning may have long gone. Number 7, Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, being late by just a few hours can cost an entire milk season. But John Deere may take 4 weeks to send someone for repairs. Not everyone knows that in Wisconsin, every time a machine breaks mid-season, thousands of gallons of milk have to be dumped. So when $500,000 equipment lies still, and the tech support line says busy people begin to realize they're standing outside the game. Wisconsin was once the pride of American agriculture, the nation's largest dairy producer, where each tractor is a backbone of the regional economy. John Deere was more than a tool. It was a symbol of the belief that farmers still mattered. But in recent years, that belief has been gradually eroded. Not by public statements, but by subtle things few noticed. Reduced technician numbers, repair rights locked behind software and customer support departments. Relocated hundreds of miles away. According to the Wisconsin Farm Bureau, John Deere's machinery prices rose over 14% in just 1 year, while wait times for parts doubled. In a state where agriculture depends on extreme weather, every delayed hour means real money. And what's lost isn't just revenue, but trust. What angers people most isn't that John Deere is leaving, but that it still hangs banners reading "Building the Future of American Agriculture" as if nothing has changed. People understand companies need to make money. They're not asking John Deere to be charitable. But if farmers are no longer the focus, stop pretending. The pretense hurts more than the withdrawal. In small communities where pictures of grandfathers on vintage John Deere tractors still hang on the wall, no one debates brand loyalty anymore. They talk about who can still repair who can share software, who won the last right to repair lawsuit. Many openly admit all brands are the same, but at least some don't pretend they're not. And then when news of multi-million-dollar bonuses for executives is released, alongside reports of /technical support, people aren't angry, they grow suspicious. Perhaps long ago, John Deere stopped being a Midwest company and became just another Wall Street stock ticker. Resistance in Wisconsin doesn't look like protests. It's thousands of small decisions, not buying new machines, selling off old ones, forming underground repair groups, reverting to manual methods to survive the season. No one hopes for apologies anymore, but they no longer believe there's a place for them in John Deere's future either. Number 8, Missouri. There were no protests when John Deere announced its manufacturing expansion to Mexico. No one smashed machines, no one cried on television, but that silence wasn't peace. It was the silence of people who had let go of illusions. Not angry, not waiting. Just when trust has worn away over the years, people stop mentioning it. Missouri wasn't short on those who once believed the promises. that machines would enable smarter farming, that systems would become more transparent, that repair rights would soon return to users. But none of that came. What they saw instead were software-locked basic features dealerships hours away, and each new update taking them further from controlling their own equipment. According to Missouri Farm Business Management, John Deere prices rose over 20% in just 3 years. But part wait times didn't shrink. Technician numbers dwindled. Maintenance became a gamble wrong season, and the whole crop is lost right season and no one's available. A faulty sensor could delay an entire field. And for farmers, waiting is never a good option. Like elsewhere, Missouri residents found their own solutions. Quietly. No dramatic declarations. They started buying older machines, learning to hack codes, studying systems like unauthorized engineers. Some whispered about independent technicians. Others formed groups to share circuit diagrams, not because they wanted to fight, but because they had no choice. What bothered them wasn't where John Deere was going, but what it left behind. Machines that couldn't be fixed, warranties that forced returns to the dealer, and an ecosystem that the more they used, the more they felt trapped. In an increasingly digitalized agriculture, Missouri is facing a new kind of hunger, not for land or water, but for control. When smart machines require permission just to start, farmers suddenly realize the only thing they truly own is the responsibility when everything fails. Missouri no longer expects new policies, no longer hopes for repair laws. They once believed, then they learned that laws may change, but the system won't. And in that system, it's not the planter who decides. Because when shareholders come first, the one who tills the soil is usually the first to be cut from the budget. Some still keep their John Deere machines in the shed, not to use, but because no one wants to buy them. Others sold them and never looked back. They say the machines still work, but using them no longer feels right. Not because of performance, but because the trust has changed. What was once a symbol is now a reminder of a time when they thought they mattered. Down south, a few families moved away, taking with them old machines and old habits. They went to places once more familiar with John Deere than even Missouri, where 3 generations once lived off one brand, and now are trying to believe that this time they won't be left behind. Number 9, California. There are places where John Deere disappeared in an obvious way. Factories shut down assembly lines. Halted stores hung up liquidation signs. But in the San Joaquin Valley, the agricultural heart of California, John Deere is still there. Machines still roll across the fields. The green logo still glows on dashboards. Seminars still take place regularly. Only one thing has changed. No one needs to call a technician anymore. No one needs a machine operator. And then gradually, no one needs a farmer. Since 2024, when John Deere began laying off tens of thousands of employees to restructure toward high-tech solutions, Californians saw clear signs. Maintenance engineers, field supervisors, troubleshooting technicians gradually vanished from fields where they used to be a familiar sight. Many worried at the time that John Deere was following Amazon's model, chasing artificial intelligence, cutting human labor, optimizing profit. But they didn't expect that just 2 years later, they themselves would become excess costs. According to the California Department of Agriculture's Q1 2025 report, more than 60% of large-scale cultivated land in the San Joaquin Valley had already been integrated into John Deere's automation system. Every decision from when to plant, how much to irrigate, to the timing of harvest is handled by software. Those who once spent their lives reading the soil, measuring wind, predicting rain, are now replaced by a line of code. No debates, no feedback, simply no longer asked. Mr. Frank, a farmer with over 30 years tied to the land, is now only called when the machine reports an error. In the past, he knew exactly when to fertilize, what seeds to plant by season, which field to rest. But today, the control panel blinks green and red by code, and he no longer has access to the settings. They call this modern agriculture, but to many small farmers in California, it's a form of exclusion. Not everyone is pushed out by law. They're sidelined in subtler ways. There's no place for them in the system. They walk into tech seminars and understand nothing, sit in training rooms where no one speaks the language of soil, only programming languages. John Deere doesn't need repair courses here, nor does it need distribution monopolies. When a company controls the entire system from data to production, those who don't fit the system are automatically removed. No threats, no announcements. Just one morning, they wake up and realize they're no longer in the season plan. And the consequence isn't just job loss. When real people are no longer needed in the fields, the surrounding communities wither too. The repair shop closes, the agri-trade school changes programs, the co-op disbands. According to the California Food Policy Center, in the first half of 2025, more than 1,200 farming families in the state's core sought emergency food aid, a record high in a decade. Hunger didn't come from crop failure. It came from having no one left to farm. The people here didn't take to the streets. They didn't write letters demanding their rights back because they knew John Deere didn't need to leave. John Deere had long left their humanity behind. What they didn't expect was to feel hunger, even when the fields were still green. In another place, Arkansas, where John Deere was once treated like family, where farmers still keep photos of 3 generations operating the same model, still believe John Deere will return. California is a warning. Will anyone find light after being left behind? Number 10, Arkansas. Not every state was outraged when John Deere left America. In Arkansas, people simply stayed silent. There were no protests, no lines of customers at dealerships demanding explanations. But anyone who's lived here can feel the shift. Old tractors are no longer spoken of with the same pride. The John Deere hats, once neatly hung by the door, are now tucked into drawers. No one says it out loud, but it seems Arkansas has quietly said goodbye to a relationship they once held deep faith in. To Arkansans, this isn't breaking news. It's just another period in a long sentence, a story in which they slowly realized they were no longer part of the company's future their fathers once served. Unlike other states where people pushed back after losing tech support, Arkansas has long been used to doing everything themselves. But when repair rights were restricted, parts prices soared and local dealerships started closing. A sense of helplessness crept across farms. According to the Arkansas Farm Bureau, over 30% of small farmers in the state still use pre-2000 machines, not because they love vintage tech, but because they believe in durability and being in control of their tools. But John Deere no longer operates that way. New software, new warranty rules, new financial structures all have made even the most loyal feel cast aside. However, Arkansas didn't choose to sit still. In their silence, they began a very different kind of transformation. In counties like Monroe and Jefferson, small cooperatives started forming not to buy new machines, but to share old parts, exchange repair skills, and most importantly, to avoid total reliance on any single tech ecosystem. Some groups even experimented with de-digitized tractors machines stripped of software, powered only by engines and iron frames enough to till soil without needing updates from a server 500 miles away. In some places, greenhouses were converted to grow short-cycle vegetables for the local market, not for profit, but so they wouldn't have to import produce from another state at double the cost. Many young farmers also began blending traditional agriculture with open-source technology, using cheap sensors instead of proprietary software, because they understood that if they didn't create something of their own, they'd forever be passive players in a game written by others. And who knows, from the very co-ops now hand-assembling tractors, or the parched land reborn by hands that won't give up, Arkansas might not only survive the hunger, but become a testament to something companies always forget, that farmers don't need to be led. They just need not to be left behind. What do you think the departure of John Deere means? A retreat amid monopolistic repair scandals and lawsuits from farmers? Or a proud farewell as they step across borders toward a globalized automated future? The answer perhaps no longer matters, because while John Deere still reports quarterly profits in the billions, those who once placed their trust in them are holding long-term debts. And the final meal of the day, sometimes the only meal, is harder to come by after the big beautiful bill drastically cut food assistance programs. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss upcoming content. The analyses in this video are based on current data and independent perspectives, and are not meant to offer absolute predictions or cause confusion. We hope this information helps the community reflect and take timely action.